thank you to the Juno School of Business team for inviting me to do this talk. It's a topic that's very, very close to my heart. I have about 15 years of corporate experience. I would say, apart from the first 2-3 years, it's primarily been selling. And it's obviously been selling to both new prospects as well as existing customers, right? Really excited to, speak to all of you on this Saturday afternoon. I understand it's a long weekend, so hopefully this will be of benefit to all of you who've taken out the time to join today. Right now, before I start and I share my screen, I just want to give you a quick background about me. So currently, I lead customer success at Coursera for India and Asia Pacific. Now, Coursera, as some of you will know, is one of the largest online learning platforms in the world. Here, essentially, I lead the Coursera for Business piece, which is essentially our corporate offering to organizations who want to upskill and reskill their employees, right? Prior to this, I was leading customer success at IM Jobs. That's where I knew Himadri and Palak as well. And before that, I've also worked for large organizations like 3M and Philips, right? Now, when I started off my career, I never thought I would get into sales, or even if I would be good at sales, right? Because typically when, you're just starting your corporate career, you have a very different outlook to what sales you think is, right? And when I started off, I had this outlook where I felt that, sales as a profession is very, very pushy. All you have to do is just pester the customer to buy your product. You have to be really outgoing. You need to talk a lot, etc. Right? And I thought personally, and given my personality, I wouldn't be successful at it, right? Because while you're seeing me over Zoom right now, if we ever get to meet in person, you'll probably, your reaction after meeting will be that Aman is not a typical sales guy, right? And that's what I thought about myself. And I remember when I joined 3M straight after college, this was about maybe 12-13 years back. My first boss said that, if you really want to succeed in your career, you'll have to pick up these sales skills, right? So even though you might feel that you don't like it or don't enjoy it, but if you want to, go ahead in your career, both professionally and personally, you will need to learn selling skills, right? And I was really, really skeptical at first, but I figured that, hey, we'll figure it out along the way. And as time went, I started realizing that I was actually good at sales, right? And it was very different to what I had imagined. And the reason, I felt that way is that I figured that I was very different from the typical salesperson, right? Usually, people think that sales guys are very, very pushy, etc. Right? But what I realized I was good at was essentially two things, right? One was I was good at listening to the customer or the prospect that I was talking to, right? And that's a very, very underrated skill that people have, specifically in India as a whole, right? All you want to do is talk, etc. I also see, some comments for people to talk in Hindi. Okay. I'll try and make it a little bit of maybe Hindi and English a mix, right? So coming back to, when I started my career, so what I was really good was as listening skill, right? And the second was empathy towards customer. And that was primarily because मैं उनकी बात सुनता था. I used to not keep talking all the time, right? I used to spend time to listen to my customer at first. And that's really what differentiated me as a sales professional, and realized that if I have to really sell with heart, I need to listen to the customer. मेरे को उसके साथ time spend करना है, and I need to know what is the pain that he's or she is feeling, right? And that's essentially how I got into sales and became a sales professional. Now I'm just going to start sharing my screen and come to this topic, which is called selling with heart, right? And एक चीज I want to just clear out before we start is when I say, selling with heart or selling with empathy or emotion, it does not mean कि, तुम customer को emotionally blackmail कर रहे हो, right? Or you're saying कि please, based on relationship, आप ले लो, आप खरीद लो, etc. Right? That's not what I mean, right? It's building that emotional connect so that he or she feels that your product or solution is more superior, right? Now, before I start, what I want to do is, just lay out expectations ki after today's session, what is it that you're going to learn, right? So maybe those 3 or 4 things that you can pick up, right? So, sabse pehle, just like when I started my career, there were these myths about selling. So I want to bust those myths, right? I'm sure aapke dimag mein bhi hoega ki, sales as a career is very difficult. How do I do it? So I want to bust some of those myths. Then I want to talk about the difference between rational versus emotional sales, right? कौन सा कब करना चाहिए? Should we do rational? Should we do emotional? दोनों mix करने चाहिए, all of that, right? And then personally, I want to show you a framework that I used to sell, right? And I've been doing this all my life, but really in the last 2 years was when I've refined this framework. And again, disclaimer is that this is not the only sales framework that works. This is one that works for me, right? So aapke liye, maybe there are not all of these elements that might work for you, but even if you're able to pick up some of these elements and incorporate into your selling style, I think merely that will be one of the success out of today's session, right? And then lastly, and more importantly, I just want all of us to have a good time. We've taken out time on a Saturday. There should be learning for all of us. So I want to keep it as lighthearted as possible. Hasi mazak karenge. I will share a lot of memes that you'll see. But more importantly, let's make this an interactive session. I know we have a Q&A towards the end, but if you feel that in between you want to stop me and ask me ki Aman ye explain karo, ye thoda aur batao, I'm happy to do that as well. Right now, this is my expectation from today's session, what I want to get out, but I realize that you are the audience. It is also about you, right? So before I start, let's do a quick poll. If all of you either on your mobile or on the web can open this website, slido.com, and enter this code that you see on the screen, right? We'll give it about a minute or so. So join at slido.com and enter this code, right? 749547. Once you do that, aapko three questions dikhenge in the poll. You can choose to either choose one of them, choose all 3 of them, choose 2 out of 3 as well. Whatever you think you want to take out of today's session, right? And I know we have 33 participants on today's call. On Slido, I can see that 3 people have started voting. So let's give it till about maybe, we have a 50-60% response rate. And Himadri, if I could just request you, it's a little hard for me to see the chat while presenting. If there are any questions and you could surface that for me, that'll be great.
Sure, I'll do that. Aman. Be rest assured.
Okay. I see we have about 9-10 people responding. We'll give it another 30 seconds. For those who are still unable to vote, you all need to do is to go to slido.com, enter this code, and you'll see this question pop up. Okay, I think I'm getting a sense. So, it's sort of neck and neck between basic understanding of how to sell using emotions, empathy, but also learning how to sell to business buyers. And then I personally like all the people who've entered 3. Whoever is entered number 3, you will make a great salesperson. Don't worry about that. Okay, I think we can end the poll. So
I second that, Aman.
Great. So I'll end the poll, but I'll focus more of my talk based on these first 2 sessions. But like I said, हम हंसी मजाक भी करने आए हैं. So number 3 भी definitely होगा यहाँ पे, right? Now, before I start, like I said, I want to bust some myths about selling, right? And generally, when we hear the term salespeople, people have different opinions, right? The person that I'm selling to usually thinks, "Hey यार, अमन सिर्फ का काम सिर्फ मुझे बेचना है, कुछ भी बेच दे, but वो एक order form लेके हमेशा मेरे दरवाजे के बाहर खड़ा है, right? My boss thinks कि अमन कोई काम नहीं करता, पता नहीं उसके नंबर कैसे हो जाते हैं, but you know, he just passes time around, right? My friends think I'm probably all day on the phone just pestering people. You know, my parents, my neighbors probably think I don't have a job. I just, you know, go and blackmail people into giving me money. But personally, I think that, you know, I am this high-flying executive who's changing the world, right? But in reality, what all salespeople eventually end up doing is this last one, right? So they are no different from you and me, usual folks who are sitting behind a desk trying to sell to a prospect or a customer, you know, with hopefully coffee to get them through the entire day, right? But this is really important, right? That, you know, you have to treat sales as a profession that you really admire, and you need to be very diligent and you know, very good at it in terms of just putting that effort, right? But when so if I could just request others to mute themselves and only speak if they have a question, that'll be great. Right? But when I speak to a lot of new folks who are entering the sales profession for the first time, yeah, you know, abhi bhi they're, you know, 1 or 2 years in their early career, the reason I typically hear them is कि यार sales तो बहुत easy है, मैं कर लूँगा, and there is a lot of money in sales, right? So that's why I want to get into sales, right? And usually when people tell me that reason, this is my reaction to them, right? कि just because you think it's easy money, it's not, right? Typically, that's not what it happens. There is a lot of money to be made in sales, but trust me, it's not easy money. And what I've seen in my last 15 years career is कि typically 90-10% का split होता है, right? So 90% people who get into sales, you know, won't end up making significant money, but it's really those 10%, those amazing sales folks who make a lot of money, right? And for those 90% who don't end up making money, usually, you know, their experience is somewhat like this: is they start to get desperate and they think कि यार मेरे को तो सिर्फ अपने sales target hit करने हैं किसी भी तरह, तो मैं phone उठाऊंगा, I will call customers or prospects 100 times a day, but I need to hit my numbers, right? And what ends up happening is that the customer or prospect not only gets stressed, but you yourself as a sales professional also get stressed, right? And you end up usually feeling like this, right? कि कौन बोलता है मुश्किल है, I am just 31 years old and I feel great, right? But what if I told you that there is really sort of a magic formula, or what I would say a magic pill, where you don't need to do all of this, right? You don't need to pressure people to succeed in sales, right? It's a very simple, easy process. And the reason because of that is that you're not selling to a robot or to, you know, a bot that you don't know anything about. You are eventually selling to people, right? And when you sell to people, you need to build that empathy. You need to build that connection from the heart, right? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So, you know, forget all the misconception that you have about sales कि high pressure role होता है, I need to call people, मेरे को सिर्फ और सिर्फ अपने product feature के बारे में बात करना है, right? That's really old school sales. In today's world, it doesn't work, right? So what I'm here to tell you is how I do it differently, and you know why. Firstly, why am I qualified to tell you this, right? So in these last 15 years, I have sold to people across 17 different countries, right? And as you know, कि हर country में the buyer is very different, right? What works in India will not probably work in a country like Indonesia or Singapore or even Japan, right? Language challenges होते हैं, cultural challenges होते हैं, you know, maturity of customer is different. But despite all of that, I have been able to sell in 17 different countries, and I have sold more than 100 crores of, you know, products or SaaS solutions, right? So when I was at 3M and Philips, I was selling, you know, physical products to doctors, dentists, nurses, hospital staff, etc., right? And then last, I would say 8-9 years has been in software sales, where I sell SaaS solutions to corporate buyers, right? And both of these are very different audiences, and yet I've been able to sell to, all of these folks, right? And some of the logos that you see are just some of the companies that I've sold to. Now, these are huge brands. They have a lot of money to spare, but equally it becomes more difficult to sell to them, right? So what is it that really I do differently, right? And that's where I want to talk to you about. What you've learned so far about sales is totally wrong. You really need to bring, rational approach honi chahiye, but you really need to bring that heart and emotions in selling, right? Now, before I start this, I'll take a quick pause, see if there are any questions. And again, Himadri, if there's anything in the chat that you see that I should answer, please let me know.
I'll do that, Aman.
Okay. I'm assuming we don't have any questions so far.
None as of now.
Okay, great. Right. Ab thoda sa, just as a disclaimer, thoda sa gyan wala session hoega, but like I said, I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. But agar if you feel that, bahut zyada gyan ho raha hai, just let me know, right? But typically, when you talk to anybody about a sales buying cycle, typically it looks like this, right? And you think ye to straightforward hai. There is a need at the buyer end. He or she will do some search on information. They will find out all competitors, all alternatives. Then they will compare all of those competitors and make a purchase decision कि इसके साथ जाना है. And based on that, somebody will get the contract, right? But ऐसा बिल्कुल नहीं होता, right? And especially ever since, this used to probably maybe happen about 15, 20 years back. But now the reality is that, especially with COVID times where you have to sell over Zoom and not in physical. Sorry, I don't know if that was a question या किसी का mic खराब था. I'm assuming latter था. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. ठीक है. So when you think about buying behavior, right, this is typically जो आपको लगता है दिमाग में कि यार ये तो logical है, लोग ऐसे buy करते होंगे, right? But ऐसा नहीं होता. Why? Because at the end of the day, like I said, you're selling to people, right? So you have to not just appeal to their rational side, but you also need to appeal to their emotional side, right? And typically how people, and especially business buyers, make decision is that there is the rational element of sales, and then there is the emotional element of sales, right? So here as a seller, they're listening to what you are saying from a rational perspective, but also how you're saying it and how you're selling that, right? In fact, a Gartner report says that at least for B2B buyers, 77% said that it's really difficult, or at least their large purchase decision was really difficult, right? Which if I go back to this model, you might think yaar, agar itna simple hota, to they would not have said that, right? Which means kuch gadbad hai kahin pe, right? If they have so much information at hand, and especially now, with the advent of internet, everybody can get any information at their fingertips. 77% of B2B buyers should not be facing a problem, right? But they're actually facing, which means that there is something wrong in the way you and I, or, generally how people are selling to them. So really what you need to do is bring out and to solve that problem of, why 77% felt they had a bad purchase experience, is you need to bring out the trust from the heart, right? So right from when you start prospecting to a new prospect, to when you sell him, and finally when you manage the customer, when they come on board, and then resell to them, it all needs to be authentic. It needs to be straight from the heart, right? And coming back to this, right? Coming back to, the rational and emotional part, typically, how our brains are functioned is there is the right-hand side and there is the left-hand side of the brain, right? And what I would say is that this heart side is actually the right side of our brain, right? Which means that, when you say selling from heart, that selling from heart decision is again taken in the right-hand side of the brain, right? And you need to have a fair balance between both this left-hand side and right-hand side, right? So the left-hand side is usually thoda rational hota hai, right? Logical hota hai, analytical hota hai. When you're selling to a buyer will usually think ki, how is this solution or product going to help me in my job, right? Kitna easy hai use karna, You know, is customer support responsive? Does it meet my needs? Is it value for money? Whereas the right-hand side of the brain, or the heart part, or the emotional part, is all about making the buyer feel and look good, right? So what I'm buying, is it a good brand? Is the person that is selling to me wo acha banda hai ki nahi? Do I identify with him at a personal level? Can I build that relationship? Is the company and the person of solid integrity? Are they making me feel special? Am I getting a good price? And most importantly is, if I buy this product, how good it will make me look in front of my boss, right? That's the usual left versus right brain fight that is always going on in any buying decision for a B2B buyer, right? I see Arjun has raised up his hands. Before I go further, Arjun, any question that you have?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, you know, this fight between left brain, right brain, kya sahi hai, kya galat hai, how do you find out, right? And do you lean towards left-hand side more? Do you lean towards right-hand side more? There is no right answer, right? To be honest, right? One is, it's also dependent on you as a person, what side you prefer. What I would say, and what I've seen in my career, is that you can't be focused on just one side, right? You have to have a good balance of both left-hand side as well as the right-hand side, right? Which means the rational approach plus the emotional, empathy, heart approach, right? It needs to be a fine balance, right? But how do you do this fine balance, right? What is the trick? Aman, आप मुझे कुछ ज्ञान दे सकते हो कि is there a framework where I can sell this, right? And that's where I can bring my experience, right? Because like I said, I have been selling, पिछले 10 साल से मैं बेच रहा हूँ to different types of buyers, right? So I have a fair sense of now what it's taken me to become successful. And I'm here to share some of those insights with you, right? Now, typically what happens is, it's a simple 6-step process, right? And it's very different to जो आपने कभी सुना होगा, right? Because what you always think, or what you think is कि यार, all I need to do is go in front of the customer or prospect, and मेरे को अपने product के बारे में बात करनी है, right? I have to tell him कि मेरा product कितना अच्छा है, how it is going to solve your pain point, you know, how it is better than my competitors. That's usually how we all start with, right? But this approach is totally wrong, right? So what I'm going to show you is a flipped approach, which is a 6-step process, right? Which starts with a phase called warmer, where you warm up the prospect or customer to the pain point that he or she is looking to solve. Then you reframe that problem for him. And then you bring about this concept called rational drowning, right? Now, these first 3 steps are usually the rational side of things, right? Where whatever you are doing is in a logical, rational manner, right? So, आप research कर रहे हो company के बारे में, उनका क्या pain point है, why do they want to buy? It's probably based on, you know, your meetings with them or secondary research. So it's all very rational and analytical, right? But that is the first step of the process. What you then need to do is, as you advance, you need to start moving towards the emotion or heart aspect of the sales, right? Where you start building that emotional impact, right? And then you talk about कि क्या नया तरीका है, and how this is my product or solution that is going to solve your pain point. So as you can see, I am not talking about my product or solution at step 1 or step 2. It is probably right towards the end, right? Probably in step 6 is when I first talk about my solution, my company, and why you should buy it, right? This is very different to how we've been attuned to selling, right? Because like I said, हम हमेशा सोचते हैं कि यार मैं जाके पेल दूंगा, अपना प्रोडक्ट के बारे में बात करनी है, कस्टमर को तो बोलना ही नहीं देना, right? What I'm going to tell you is, you know, walk you through each of these stages and then show you a real example of how I have sold a 100 crore or a 2 crore deal to a large Australian customer using this exact same technique, right? So let's start with, in fact, even before step 1, there is the step 0, right? Which you don't see on the slide, but I have not put it because usually step 0 to har koi kar leta hai. It's basic hygiene, right? Where you do all of this solid research, right? Before you get into a meeting with the prospect, you find out कि यार उसका what is the purpose of this meeting, right? What is the value I am going to add? How will this make him or her do his job better, right? Basic research, right? About their industry, about their product, about their competitors, etc., right? And this is usually where you're setting yourself up for success by defining a game plan, right? Then once you've done that research phase is when you move on to step one, which is tailoring your sales message. So it focuses on the customer or prospect, right? And not on your product, right? मैं बार-बार ये repeat करूंगा that you don't have to sell your product or solution right at the stage 1 or stage 2, right? Remember, you have to lead to the solution, not with the solution, right? So at this step 1 is essentially, this is probably your first or second meeting with a customer or prospect. What you're showing him is the overall vision. Ki, sir, aap karna kya chahte ho, right? What is it that you're really trying to solve by talking to me today, right? Does this align with your organization goals? What happens if you don't achieve this, right? If for example, if I'm selling to a bank, I'll probably ask them कि आप मुझे बताओ what are other banks in your competitive space doing, right? Differently that you want to do, right? So it's all about tailoring your sales message to what the customer or prospect wants, right? And then this leads to a behavior change, right? You're still in step 1, but now you're asking these questions, right? If it's selling to a new prospect, you're asking ki, why do you want to change, right? And why do you want to change now, right? Why are you talking to me essentially, right? Why didn't you reach out to me before? So if there is a need, if there is something you're wanting to solve for, why now, right? And if I'm reselling to an existing customer or, selling more to them, I will ask them questions like, why do you want to stay with us, right? Why do you want to invest in this partnership, right? Now, this is very, very critical. Because at this stage, you're building your credibility with either the prospect or the customer, right? And you want to make sure that the customer understands the pain that he or she is feeling, right? Like they should know exactly why do they want to buy your product before they even buy your product, right? And while it's a very simple way, you will also at this stage come across 3 different types of people, right? One will be called mobilizers. The others will be talkers, and the third persona of people that you meet in this buying journey will be called blockers, right? Now, ये क्या होते हैं, right? Mobilizer क्या होता है, talker क्या होता है, blocker क्या होता है, right? Essentially, mobilizers are people, and again, disclaimer that मैं बोल रहा हूं तो बहुत आसान साउंड होता है. This is usually a journey, right? And you will get better with it over time. So जितना आप सेल्स करोगे, जितने आप कस्टमर से बात करोगे, जितना प्रोस्पेक्ट से बात करोगे, you will figure out over time ki who are the mobilizer versus talkers versus blockers, right? But what you want to get to is the first one, which is mobilizer. These are people who ask you a lot of questions, right? They are driven by success. They want to build that consensus. They want to get your product or solution on board, right? They are usually insights. They are very insight oriented. A lot of times हम डर जाते हैं, right? When a prospect asks me questions or a customer asks me questions, हम डर जाते हैं कि यार ये क्या बकवास कर रहा है, कितने क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है, right? And I might not know the answer. And you feel कि इस बंदे से तो हमें बात ही नहीं करनी है क्योंकि ये बहुत सवाल पूछता है, right? Whereas it should be the opposite, right? Like these are the people who really are challenging you to understand what your product is and how it's going to be beneficial for them. So you have to really find out who is the mobilizer in your buying decision, right? Similarly, you will come across other people जो कि बहुत अच्छे हैं बात करने में, बहुत बात करते हैं, right? They are sharing a lot of information. आप उनसे जो मर्जी पूछो कि सर मेरे को बता दो साइनिंग अथॉरिटी कौन होएगा, कितना बजट है, क्या टाइमलाइन है, वो सब बता देंगे, right? And you will naturally, because they are so easy to talk to, you will gravitate towards the talkers, right? And you say ये बंदा सही है, ये मेरा काम करा देगा, right? He will help me sell within the organization, right? One thing you need to remember is that it's important to keep these talkers engaged, but one important part is कि if they are talking to you, remember they are also talking to your competitors, right? तो वो same चीज तुम्हारे competitor को भी बता रहा है, right? So he's not doing you a favor by telling you all this. It is his personality type, which is why he's sharing all of these insights. But he's sharing these insights with everyone, whoever he talks to, right? And usually these people don't have influence in the buying process, right? But you need to use them smartly to get all the information. But eventually you want to move to the mobilizer stage, right? And the third stage also that you will identify people during the buying process is blockers, right? These are people who will not ask any questions or who will have a very negative outlook. Ki, ye to bakwas hai, ye to kaam hi nahi karega. Sorry, is there a question? No. Okay. Right. So coming back to blockers, right? So you need to identify who are the blockers, right? They will usually not allow you to either get in front of the decision maker, or they will say कि यार जो चल रहा है एकदम सही चल रहा है, I don't want to change, right? मेरा तो solution एकदम सही है. Yeah. Palak, Himadri, could I ask you to just mute people who are unmuted?
Yeah, Palak, can you please mute everyone, barring Aman at the moment?
Great, thank you. Right. So you need to really identify who are these blockers and stay away from them, right? When I say stay away, it does not mean that you need to ignore them. If they ask you for information, you need to still give them, because you never know how they might negatively influence the buying behavior, right? But what
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
सर ये जो ब्लॉकर्स रहते हैं इनको सर अपैथेटिक बायर्स भी कहते हैं क्या सर?
I would say maybe to some stage, yes, but usually they are not buyers, right? So pathetic buyer kuch nahi hota. It is either
Apathetic, sir.
Yeah, it is either a buyer or a non-buyer. So these are usually non-buyers, right? They are resistant to change. So they will say कि यार पवन मेरे को कुछ नहीं करना, जो चल रहा है एकदम सही चल रहा है, मेरे को तो नहीं करना कुछ, right? तुम्हारा प्रोडक्ट बहुत महंगा है, बहुत बेकार है, whatever, right? Yes, that is how you identify and say कि they're a non-buyer, right? And they're a blocker in their decision making. So what you want to get to is the mobilizer. Once you've identified the mobilizer, that is when you move on to step 2, right? And you reframe the decision or the problem and identify why they are looking to buy your product, right? So mobilizer ke paas aa gaye ho ab aap. You've identified kaun sahi banda hai that you need to sell to. Now you need to ask them questions like why do you need to change, and also focus on the pain point of it, right? What happens if you don't change, right? And this is really, really important, right? Because if you look at it, human psychology is more geared towards pain than happiness, right? अगर फॉर एग्जाम्पल मैं अपने दोस्तों के साथ गोवा जा रहा हूँ, राइट? मैं बहुत अच्छी ट्रिप करके आया, 1 हफ्ता गोवा में बिता के आया हूँ, आई हैड अ ग्रेट टाइम, बट आफ्टर 1 week,
can I ask a simple question? Because
sure.
It's very important to put your question thought process. We all are from the sales background, and there are 2-3 points. When a salesperson visit to any of the organizations, the first leader start either from the technical team or from the commercial team, right? If it
Correct.
is a customized project, then it start from the technical team, and if it is a ready-made product, then it is start from the commercial team. So
Correct.
Commercial team does not listen to the technical part, and technical team does not listen to the commercial part. Being a salesperson, the sales engineer or salesperson need to drive both the things equally.
Correct.
But the challenge are the commercial team even not ready to listen any technical aspect, and until or unless the one person will not listen commercial as well technical, you cannot sell your USP.
Correct.
And the problem is that is why you will not get the value of your product.
Right.
The second important point is when the salesperson visit to any of the company to sell his project, his product or the equipment. The problem is he go ladder by ladder. First the junior engineer, then the manager, then the PMC, then come to the purchase, and even when the decision comes to the final table, then the owner get involved, and he try to bypass the entire system and try to connect to the owner of the seller company.
Correct.
The whole the equation, whole efforts of the salesperson goes in vain, and he get demoralized.
Correct.
So what is the solution and what is the answer for that?
Correct. Great question. And I'll come to that in a bit, right? what I'm hearing is कि आप बोल रहे हो कि Aman, when I go to sell something, there is the commercial team, there is the technical team, right? And both have different buying behaviors. दोनों की अलग problem होती है, and usually consensus नहीं बन पाता. And then as a salesperson, sometimes I end up going to the top, right to the MD, by trying to bypass the process, and वहाँ भी problems आती हैं, right? And I feel my effort is wasted, right? That's your question, right?
So the first question is that, and the second question, the problem is the purchase guy does not listen for the technical things, and technical guy does not listen to the commercial part. They both want to get a better price and best product.
Correct. Which is why exactly, right? So what you're seeing as part of this framework that I'm showing you is essentially.
So purchase guy always tries.
Sorry, go ahead.
So the example I would like to put it here. The purchase guy has intent to buy a Mercedes in an Alto price, right? And technical guy want to have a Mercedes in Alto price.
Correct.
So the thought process of both the team member, I would say employee, are altogether different. You want to have all the technical aspect, word-based product with a cheapest price.
Correct. So my answer to that is कि, that's the classic trap of sales, right? That you try to please everyone, and then you figure कि, like, if it's the commercial person, I need to sell based on the right price, right? Whereas if it's the technical person, I need to sell based on technical competencies. And that's usually what happens कि at that first stage, either you start talking about price or you start talking about your technical solution, right? What I am saying is कि right from the start, like, you have to avoid those आपको वो करना ही नहीं है, right? You have to change. You have to first find out technical वाला बंदा है. You have to ask him कि tell me what is the problem you are trying to solve, right? आप 10-50 technical requirements मांग रहे हो, उसमें से एक या दो what is most critical to you, right? What is it that will make you become the hero if I give you these 2-3 things, right? Versus when you're talking to a commercial, firstly, commercial is, unavoidable, but I would say avoid having commercial discussions, especially at the start of anything, right? Because one, it's always a losing game for you as a salesperson, and you are not able to drive value, right? So we'll come to that part. Let me just finish this and I'll come quickly to that part as well, right? So right now at this stage, you are trying to reframe your problem, right? You're saying कि आप मेरे को बताओ कि what is it that, if you want to buy this product, what is it that you really want to change, right? And coming back to the thing, this is where you need to focus more on the pain rather than the happiness, right? So going back to my Goa example, अगर मैं अपने दोस्तों के साथ गोवा जा रहा हूँ, I have a really good time in Goa, एक हफ्ता बिताया, but I come back, that happiness probably lasts for maybe a week, 2 weeks, right? But imagine if I had this plan of going to Goa with my friends and वो last day cancel हो जाता है. I will probably think about that plan for the next 1-2 years, right? So that pain of not going to Goa is more than the happiness of going to Goa, right? And that's typically true for all buying decisions in all sales, right? You don't have to focus on what happiness my product or solution will bring you. You have to focus on what is the pain अगर आप ये नहीं लेते हो तो, right? Which is where you bring the rational rounding element, right? And you focus कि आप बोल रहे हो कि आपको सबसे सस्ता चाहिए, right? But अगर आप ये सबसे सस्ता लोगे, right? या फिर आप जो currently use कर रहे हो, अगर आप वही use करते हो, then this is essentially what is going to happen, right? This is how you are going to fail, and this is how you are going to look bad in front of your boss or in front of management, right? And then you have to back these up with insights, right? And I'll come to how I do that, right? Now, once you've done all of this, is when you start building or focusing on the emotional aspect, right? And then you start talking about in terms of stories, right? No insights, right? But you have to stay focused. That story has to be focused on the negative of not changing, right? And this is where you start really appealing to the heart, right? Remember, it is rational that makes a person think, but it is emotion that makes a person act, right? And we all hear कि we should start discussing customer case studies, how you've developed this solution for one of your competitors, right? This is where you start bringing in those stories and say कि, sir, when I sold this product or solution in a similar say, this is what it was achieved with X and Y customer, right? And again, focus not on the happiness, but focus again on key, they were not willing to change. This is what they ended up losing. And when we got them, this is what they ended up winning, right? That's the part you need to focus on. Remember, even till now, I have not spoken about my solution or my product, right? I have just said ki, agar aap nahi karte ho, so this is what you stand to lose. Once I've done with that and I've brought that emotional impact, this is probably step 5 and 6 is when you first time talk about your product, right? And again, you lead with the solution, you lead to the solution, but not with it, right? This is when you say, ki, sir, dekho, agar the cost of not changing is X, Y, Z dollars, this is how my product is going to help you solve that problem, right? You have finally at the end of the 5th or 6th stage come to your new way and solution, right? And again, like I said, this is a framework that you can use. It will not be, some of these will not be applicable in some scenarios. You can pick and break some of this, right? But I also want to give you an example of how I used this framework to recently sell to one of the largest banks in Australia. And this was more than a 2 crore deal, right? Now, if you remember, I spoke that I'm currently working at Coursera where we sell learning solutions to corporates, right? This bank approached us and said, Ki, Aman, we want to pilot Coursera within the bank. And this was head of HR. Can you just share what all Coursera has and how it is going to help us, right? Now, agar simple hota tha, I could have just shared my brochure with them, said these are the benefits of using Coursera versus what you are currently doing, etc., right? But I would not have won that deal, or had I gone, I would have probably won maybe, a 2 lakh deal instead of a 2 crore deal, right? So what we did is we focused on what is the pain they are trying to solve, right? Now, if you look at when we sort of researched, we figured out ki is bank mein problem kya tha, right? They are the largest bank in Australia. They have billions of dollars under assets, but they are being threatened by these new fintech players within the industry, right? Who are either taking away some of their customers, or internally in terms of talent, a lot of people don't want to join this large bank because they prefer working in these startups or these new age fintechs, right? Those were the 2 problems that the bank was facing at a boardroom level, right? How do we reduce attrition? How do we retain and attract talent? And second, how do we retain our customers by offering them a better experience, right? Isme learning ka kahin kuch nahi hai, right? That's the approach we took to the head of HR and the CEO of the bank, where we said, ki, look, given the COVID scenario, the future workplace is going to be very diverse, very different from what you and I have been used to, right? Pehle kya hota tha, finance team used to work only on finance related work, marketing team used to work only on marketing related work. But in the future workplace, this is going to be more of a hybrid and cross-functional skilling environment, right? Where people will need to pick up different skills given the scenario that's changing, right? There's this whole lockdown. There are these new digital skills emerging. There are over 150 million jobs that will emerge in the next 5 years in areas like cybersecurity, cloud computing, right? But your employees currently don't have any of these skills, right? Which is why you are losing out to talent, right? And what we said is, ki, imagine in the future, right, that you have a competitor which is a low-cost digital bank. Sab cheez, designed by AI engines hai. There are no cross-border payment issues. There are lesser fees. There are AI systems to take care of everything. People have never come to the bank or physical branch in last 5 years. Imagine if this competitor was to come and threaten your existence, right? Abhi ye nahi hai, but it is a high reality in the next few years, right? To aap kya karoge? Imagine you are competing against this type of a competitor, right? That's the emotional element we book of you not changing, right? Again, I have not talked about Coursera. I have not talked about anything that I have to offer till now. I have just said कि ये आपकी problem है. आप continue कर सकते हो, कोई problem नहीं है. But अगर आप नहीं change करते हो, then what happens, right? Once I've established that emotional impact, that's when I lead to the solution. And I say ki ab socho, imagine now if there was a solution which could help your employees build some of these new age skills around cybersecurity, data science, cloud computing, right? So that they pick up these new age skills, which means you not only upskill, reskill them, you then are able to have them use these skills to attract and retain the talent pool and also deal with this future competitor, right? And also, as a leadership team, you also should have the capability of measuring how these skills or outcomes are measured, right? And hence I started then talking about, if you want to do this, this is where Coursera comes in through our approach, which will help you save X dollar in cost and so many employee productivity, right? So, that's really how, I used this 6-step approach to sell to this large bank, right? Now,
Amandeep, I have a question here.
Yeah.
For your same example, suppose the same bank would have hired a professional consultant who would have defined this is the solution for your bank. And then it has been floated the tender in the market, equally good company like yours, and you supposed to only quote the price. You supposed to submit your offer, and the company has already trusted on his respective consultant who has designed, who has studied the entire system. Then what would have your approach?
Correct. So what you're talking about is an RFP process, right? And typically I've done also a lot of deals in an RFP sort of environment. But again, like you're saying, is usme bhi process ye hota hai ki there is a third party, a consultant who floats that RFP. But even before they float that RFP, and before you just submit price, you have some conversations with them, right? And even if a consultant, so what I would do in that case is I would probably have slightly less control in the process. So I might not sell to the eventual buyer, but my first level buyer is that consultant, right? So I would still go through this process with him. And these consultants, even before they float the RFP or when they finalize it, they can make internal changes to favor you, right? And it's not a matter of, you paying them a bribe or something. They will make the RFP in such a way that it favors you, etc. And price is one of the considerations, right? And you're right. RFP, you will have slightly less control, but even with the consultant, this approach would work to some extent, right? Sub steps nahi hoenge, but some of them will happen.
But in case of RFP, sometimes you try to influence the consultant. Sometimes you may not be able to succeed to influence the consultant. Sometimes he is a very wise, sometimes he is a very open. And in case of wise, then you can own the order. And in case he is unbiased, he is a very, the specifications are open, then it is very difficult. In spite you are having a very good top quality product, you are unable to, compete in the market.
Correct.
Then what is the solution for that?
So that is why, so I think I forgot to mention this, but as a sales professional, remember I said ki you need to have 2 really good skills. You need to have good listening skills. You need to have empathy, but you also need to have the ability to face rejection, right? And agar deal ho jati hai, so we usually, be at this stage, right? Ki main to bhagwan hu, maine bech diya, right? But it's a sales environment, right? You will not win 100% of your deals, right? If you don't win it, theek hai, you have to still trust the process. You have to go back and reach out to a new prospect. ऐसा कोई भी sales वाला दुनिया में नहीं है जो 100% deals बेच देता है, right? And if somebody tells you he or she is lying, I have probably, if I have sold to these across 17 countries, 100 crore deals, I would have probably lost double the number of deals, right? So that's the job of a salesperson, right? You have to face rejection, but as long as you trust the process, you will win and you will start seeing these large wins, right? Unfortunately, like I said, मैं ये नहीं बोलूँगा कि आप सब deal जीत पाओगे, right? That if anybody tells you he or she is lying. Okay, I just also want to quickly also call out that if you see, what I presented to you today, also follows, the same 6-step process, right? So मैं आ सकता था, I could have right now started off by showing you this selling framework and they said कि ये 6 देख लो, ये तुम्हारा काम हो गया, ये हो जाएगा, right? But I didn't start off with the solution, right? I led to the solution of the 6-step framework, right? I first warmed you to why sales is important. What are the characteristics of a good salesperson? I reframed the problem. I brought about both rational and the emotional impact of sales. And then I led to this 6-step process, right? So if you look at it, somewhat even in this presentation that I've showed you today, I have gone with this 6-step approach, right? But like I said, there will be some deals that you win, some deals that you eventually lose. But like I said, when you eventually win those deals, this is your reaction, right? Ki main Bhagwan hu, I have hit my targets. This usually in a sales profession, again, lasts only for some time because agle mahine tumhara boss will give you fresh targets. So this process is always repeating, right? That's broadly what I wanted to share today. I know we've spent probably about 40-45 minutes talking. Thank you to whoever asked questions. I will now stop presenting and take some more questions. Himadri, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Aman. So I think, first and foremost, I would like to thank Aman that, you shared your personal experiences और जो भी आपके success mantra थे. और मुझे यकीन है कि आपके एक्सपीरियंस से, आपके अनुभव से, आपके तजुर्बे से हमें बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला है एंड हम इसको कोशिश करेंगे कि वी इम्प्लीमेंट दिस इन आवर वर्कस्पेस. सो इंडीड इट वाज एन इंसाइटफुल सेशन. अब मैं जितने भी पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं मैं उनसे रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा इफ यू वुड वांट टू आस्क एनी स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चंस दैट यू हैव फॉर अमन. And personally, I think one of the biggest topics of something that excites me, जो मेरे दिल के बहुत करीब है, is the rational and emotional, the भावनात्मक सोच of a customer and the सकारात्मक सोच. So emotional is something जो आप दिल से सोचते हो, महसूस करते हो, और rational वो होता है जो आप दिमाग से सोचते हो. तो कोई भी बायर जब भी वो कुछ भी खरीदने जाता है तो उसके पास हमेशा ये दो चीजें होती हैं, या तो वो रैशनल नीड्स को ज्यादा फोकस करता है, इमोशनल नीड्स को ज्यादा फोकस करता है. तो आई थिंक ये अमन आपने एक बहुत अच्छी चीज शेयर करी. So this is personally, that is something that I really like and you added a lot of insights. So I would request everybody if you can ask questions, जो भी आपके दिमाग में सवाल आ रहे हो, जो भी अमन ने आपके साथ शेयर किया है, प्लीज अमन से पूछिए.
Great. I see a question. Palak पूछ रही है कि how does this change on a B2C front, right? Great question, Palak. So what I showed you today is mostly oriented towards B2B selling. And that's the experience that I have. B2C maybe again, right? B2C selling is slightly different. Again, it could be a physical product where you are a FMCG company, you are selling directly to consumer. But in today's scenario, mostly B2C selling is also online selling, right? And that's when product design usually takes care of some of these elements, right? So if you're shopping as a consumer on new age platforms like Myntra, Flipkart, Amazon, you'll notice that some of these emotional and rational elements are built into the product itself, right? Things like if you look at Amazon pricing, right? High price, or usually everybody does it now, high price, 60% discount, and then that leads to your emotional side from a pricing perspective, right? And it influences the right side of your brain. Then there are things that you'll see ki this product is in 37 other carts, right? That leads to a trigger in emotion that कि यार ये product चला जाएगा, मेरे को खरीदना है, right? Those are sort of built into the product. It follows sort of the same framework, maybe not exactly, but some elements of this.
Aman, I have a basic question. In most of the cases, there are two kind of customers. In any deal, there are two important people. One is influencer and one is decision maker. As a salesperson, he tries to interact with the influencer, but there is a very thin line. If you cross the influencer and try to reach to the decision maker, he get annoyed and he may deteriorate or he may destroy your deal. But sometimes if you does not cross this thin line and not reach to the decision maker, you may lose the deal as well.
Correct. Absolutely.
So it's a very critical situation for any sales engineer, that do I need to cross the influencer and go to the decision maker, or should I rely only on the decision maker? Whatever decision he is going to take, it will good for me. I think it will be favoring to me. So in both way, I have seen multiple cases. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work. So how a salesperson will give the confidence that in this particular deal I should not cross or I should cross? What is the symptom for that?
Correct. Great question. And I've also faced this issue a lot of times, right? Ki, if there is an influencer who is already helping me to some stage, should I cross him or not? Should I go to his boss? But what if I offend him, etc. Right? Again, from my experience, what I've seen is that as long as you are continuing to add value to his job, right? If you're making him feel good, there is no reason for him not to introduce you or become the blocker or gatekeeper in the boss, right? And this is where the concept of multiple mapping also comes in, right? And especially in today's scenario where you're selling digitally, a SaaS solution or product, this is when stakeholder mapping becomes really important. So maybe आप अपने उससे influencer से बात कर रहे हो, but you can get your boss or your MD or CEO to align separately with the decision maker or the CEO MD there, right? And make it feel कि यार मैं तो ना आपको क्रॉस नहीं किया, हम बात करते रहेंगे. My boss is on this industry panel, he met your boss, they connected. It has to be done in a smart manner, right? Again, there is no right or wrong approach here, but as you keep going with the process, it usually gets better. So my answer to your question would be ki identify firstly is keep adding value to the influencer, make sure he is able to introduce you to the decision maker. If you're not, then you will have to bypass him, not yourself, but at an executive level, get your managing director or CEO to speak to his CEO, etc.
Aman, so there are two people who've raised their hands. So सबसे पहले अर्जुन आप अपना सवाल पूछ सकते हैं एंड उसके बाद राज पुरोहित आप अपना सवाल पूछ सकते हैं.
May I ask my question first?
Yeah, Raj Purohit, आप पूछ लो. You can ask because I think Arjun is still on mute. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, hi Amandeep sir. Thanks a lot for such an insightful session. So I'm Himanshu. I'm 16 right now, and I'm working on my 4th startup. So it's a platform called the Strangify. So like what I have observed in recent days that companies like MBA Chai Wala and Chai Sutta Bar, what they are doing is they are selling their stories to market their product. And I want to make such an approach to reach the customers, because we have a service, we don't have a particular product. So like how can we use that particular approach for our company?
Correct. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying ki what your startup is working on is a solution and not a product, right? And how do you sell that?
Sorry to interrupt, but we are a platform where random strangers can meet to have deep conversations and share problems.
Correct. Right. So it's true, Rajpurath, even for me right now, right? The company that I work for is a platform. We don't have any physical product that we sell, right? It's a SaaS solution. People come, essentially it's a platform where content creators who have already created content and these learners come and learn that content, right? But again, what I would say, there are two models. One is a direct B2C model where you are not involved as a platform, but eventually when you want to grow the platform, you will have to enter into a B2B selling model as well, right? And that's when this approach will probably be more relevant for you. For a B2C direct model where as a platform you are not selling anything, it's the platform that is selling. That's what I was answering to Palak's question, that some of these aspects will have to be built into the platform itself, right? To facilitate that.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, Arjun, are you there? Arjun, आप हो? आपने अपना हाथ उठाया था सवाल पूछने के लिए. Okay, Aman, so there's another question that we've got on the chat box. Rajiv is asking, how about selling in a tender scenario where all contenders meet the specs and winner is often based on the lowest offer? So the buyer may appreciate quality but not be willing to pay a premium for it. So that's what he's asking.
Correct. And these are, usually you're right. These are cases where you have little influence over the buying behavior or process. It's usually down to price. Now, how we've tackled the scenario is usually tender process hota hai where there is a large amount of money involved, right? What we usually do is that कि हम ठीक है tender process तो करेंगे, but we identify different segments in the business that we can sell to, which don't need to go through a tender process because the buying is really small, right? So maybe agar tender process starts at for a price where the winning bid will be of maybe 10-15 crores, obviously I will base that on price. But what I will do is separately I will look at avenues where I can sell to existing business buyers in that organization, where it might be a small 30-40 lakh deal, but uske liye tender process nahi karna padta. Once I've got a foothold, I use that as a foothold to get into that organization. And then, then it's a function of upselling, cross-selling within the organization. But now once I've got into the organization, I have more influence. And then possibly at a later tender stage, I can influence at an org-wide purchase. So usually that's the approach that we've taken in the past.
Thank you. Good answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, any more questions? कोई सवाल आप पूछना चाहोगे? Any questions that you have before we close the session? None? Okay, great, guys. Thank you so much, Amandeep, for being part of this session and sharing your experiences. And thank you to all the participants कि आपने Saturday में से एक सवा घंटा निकाला and you attended this session. I'm sharing all the links जो हमारे LinkedIn के, YouTube के, Facebook के, Instagram handles हैं. You can always go and visit. अगर आप लोगों के पास कोई भी सवाल है, अगर आप sales related कोई भी question है, आप जानना चाहते हो, you want more insights, please do drop us a mail at hello@junoschool.org. We'll be more than happy to help you. Okay, and keep attending these webinars. So technically, every Saturday, 12 o'clock onwards, we would be having a webinar on any topic which is related to sales. Okay, so you can always be a part of this. You can see all the links on the chat box, and please visit us on every Saturday for these webinar sessions. Thank you, everybody. Thanks once again, Aman, and thanks for being part of this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking out time. Hopefully this session was insightful and there are some takeaways. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.